Every species in this galaxy keeps records. The Threxan carve their dead into bone walls. The Oluns sing their histories into deep water and trust the current to remember. My own people, the Versani, press ink onto paper, and we have done so for 19,000 years. But there's a difference between keeping a record and understanding what a record is. A record is not a list. A record is a kind of resurrection. When the person is gone, when the building is rubble, when the empire has fallen and no one alive remembers the language, the record remains. And as long as anyone can still read it, the dead are not entirely dead. That is what my people believe. That is what I was trained to believe at the Civil Registry, and what I have come to believe even more firmly in the 410 years I have served as a senior archivist. I tell you this because today I'm opening a case file that I do not think any of you will forget. My name is Yetha Moore. I am the lead obituary archivist for the Galactic Civil Registry, and you are listening to a recorded interview for the Oral History program. The file we are opening today is sealed under Council Order 714, but the redactions expired last month and the witness has agreed to speak on record. The incident is officially known as the Veral 9 Bureaucratic Reorganization. That is the polite name. The honest name is the one used by the people who were there. They call it the day the Human's Notebook killed 46 conspirators without firing a single shot. Part 2, for those of you who do not follow Coreward political news, I will tell you what is publicly known about the Veral 9 incident, and then I will tell you what was redacted, and then I will tell you why we are sitting here today. What is publicly known is this. 3 years ago, on a trade station near the Veral sector, a faction within the Tereth Concord attempted to seize control of the Coreward Trade Authority. The coup was discovered before it could complete. 46 high-ranking Tereth officials were arrested. 11 took their own lives before trial. The remaining 35 were tried before the council and sentenced. The Trade Authority returned to ordinary operations within 9 days. That is the public record. It is as public records often are both true and almost completely useless. What was redacted is more interesting. The coup was not discovered by council intelligence. It was not discovered by a Tereth defector or by a sympathetic ally, or by any of the dozen security agencies that in theory exist to prevent exactly this kind of event. The coup was discovered, identified, named, dated, and documented by a single records clerk who had been working in the basement of Veral 9 for 22 years and who had never once been promoted, never once been formally commended, and never once in all that time been considered important by anyone on the station. His name was Walter Hennig. He was human. He was 61 years old. He kept a paper notebook. That notebook is now held in the council evidence vault under permanent preservation order. It is, I am told, the most requested document in the vault's 300-year history. Researchers come from every quadrant to see it. Most are turned away. The few who are admitted are not allowed to photograph it. They are allowed to read it in person for 1 hour while a council guard watches. I have read it. I read it for the case file. I read it twice, in fact, and on the second reading, I cried for the first time in 60 years, which is not a thing my people are known to do. My guest today is one of the few non-humans who knew Walter Hennig personally. She worked on Veral 9 for 9 years as a diplomatic attaché for the Kreshka delegation. She was in the upper chamber the day the coup began. She is the only non-human survivor of that chamber who has agreed to speak on record. Her name is Mirin Savek. She is here in the studio with me. Mirin, thank you for coming. I know this is not an easy conversation, it is not, but I have been waiting a long time to have it. Part 3. Tell me about Veral 9, not the official description, the real one. Veral 9 was a filing station. That is what we called it among ourselves. Officially, it was a trade authority subhub, but in practice, it was a place where paperwork went to be argued about. Every shipment, every tariff, every dispute, every license renewal in 3 sectors passed through Veral 9 at some point. We had 4,000 permanent staff. We had 19 species represented. We had, I think, the worst cafeteria in the Coreward sector, though that is a personal opinion, and I will not defend it. The hierarchy on the station was unspoken, but very rigid. The Tereth Concord ran the upper chambers. The Olun handled finance. My people, the Kreshka, handled diplomatic interfacing. The Threxan handled security. The various other species were distributed through the middle ranks, and then there were the humans. How were the humans treated? Politely. That is the honest answer. They were treated politely, and they were treated as if they were not really there. The humans on Veral 9 worked in the lower archives. Most of them were records clerks. They filed, they retrieved, they cross-referenced, they translated old documents into current trade standard. It was considered among the council species to be the lowest tier of meaningful work, not menial. We had drones for menial work, but the kind of work that a serious career does not include. Humans are, you understand, a young filing species. They have only kept formal interstellar records for about 300 years. The Tereth have kept records for 40,000, the Olun for 60. There was an assumption, never spoken aloud but always present, that humans simply did not yet understand what records were for. They were tolerated, they were given the basement, they were occasionally invited to staff functions and politely ignored once they arrived. This was the culture of Viryl 9, and Walter Hennig worked in the lower archives for 22 years. Tell me about him. Tell me what he was like. I'm sorry, give me a moment, take your time. He was a small man. Even for a human, he was small. He had gray hair that he never quite kept combed, and he wore the same kind of brown jacket every day, which I'm told is unusual, even among humans. He had a desk in the third sub-level archive, in the corner, near the ventilation duct, which was a desk no one else wanted because the duct made a low humming sound at all hours. He drank tea, he drank a great deal of tea. He had a small electric kettle on his desk, which was technically against station regulations, and which everyone pretended not to notice for 22 years. He was unfailingly polite. He said good morning to everyone, including the species who do not have mornings. He held doors, he remembered names. He remembered somehow the names of every visiting delegate's children, and he would ask after them by name when the delegates returned 6 months later, and the delegates were always startled and then pleased. And they would tell their colleagues who would file this away as a strange human eccentricity, and he wrote in a notebook. Yes, he wrote in a notebook. He had a paper notebook. Bound in dark green cloth, he carried it everywhere. He wrote in it during meetings, during meals, during corridor conversations, during the long station ceremonies that no one enjoyed. He wrote with a pen. An actual pen with ink that he refilled himself from a small bottle he kept in his desk drawer. This was, as you can imagine, a topic of considerable amusement. Part 4, how did people react to the notebook? The way you would expect, with laughter. Never cruel laughter, you understand. Walter was too polite to invite cruelty, but it was a running joke on the station. The human and his little book, the little brown jacket, and the little green notebook, and the little electric kettle. There was a tradition on Viryl 9 that I think began about 15 years before the incident. Every year at the winter staff function, someone would give Walter a data pad as a gift, a nice one. Top of the line, sometimes from the Tereth representatives, sometimes from the Oluni, once memorably from the station director himself. Always presented with great ceremony. Walter, we noticed you're still using your little book. Please, allow us, from all of us, and Walter would accept it. He would thank them genuinely. He would say it was very kind, he would take it home, and the next morning, he would be back at his desk with his pen and his green notebook and his tea. Did he ever explain why? He gave a different reason every time. I remember a few of them. He told one delegate that the pages smelled nice. He told another that the pen was a gift from his father, which I later learned was not true. He had bought it himself at a market on Earth. He told the station director that his handwriting was bad and he did not want to inflict it on a database. He told me once that he wrote slowly and that this was the point. He said, you cannot lie as fast with a pen as you can with a keyboard. He said, the pen makes you mean what you say. I did not understand what he meant at the time. I understand now. What happened to the data pads? This is a question that the council investigators asked me, and I will tell you what I told them. The data pads were every single one of them donated to a small school for human children on the lower deck. I did not know this until after the incident. Walter never mentioned it. The school's headmaster mentioned it during the inquest. He said Walter brought a data pad in every year, every December for 15 years. He said Walter never wanted to receive. He said Walter would not let his name be put on the donor list. There were 15 data pads. The school still has all of them. You said the day of the coup began with a lockdown. Walk me through it. It was a Wednesday. I remember this because the Kreshka delegation had a budget meeting on Wednesdays and I was on my way to it. I was in the upper chamber corridor holding my tea, which is something I picked up from Walter. Actually, the habit of carrying tea through the corridors. I was 3 meters from the chamber doors when the lockdown alarm sounded. The alarm on Viryl 9 was a low tone, 3 notes repeating. It was not loud, it was designed to be calming. The Tereth had insisted on this when the station was built because they believed that loud alarms caused poor decisions. In retrospect, this was a very useful design choice for them. The doors sealed, I was on the wrong side, I should have been inside the chamber with the rest of the delegation. I was outside in the corridor alone with my tea. I heard through the door the sound of weapons discharging. I heard voices I recognized. I heard the voice of the terrace station director calmly explaining to the assembled council delegates that the trade authority was being reorganized for efficiency and that their cooperation would be appreciated. I heard one of my own colleagues, Senator Vell, ask what was happening, and I heard her voice stop in the middle of a word. I dropped my tea. I ran. Where did you run to? I ran to the lower archives. I do not know why. I think it was instinct. I think part of me already knew. I think part of me had been watching Walter Henning for 9 years and had registered somewhere below conscious thought that this was the only person on the station who would know what to do. I reached the third sublevel. I went through the door of the archive. Walter was at his desk. He had his tea, he had his pen, he had the notebook open in front of him. He looked up at me. He was not surprised. He was not afraid. He looked at me the way a person looks at someone who has finally arrived at an appointment they did not know they had. He said, "Miss Solveig, please sit down. We have about 11 minutes before they come for the archives." He said, "I have been waiting a long time for this conversation. Part 5. What did he tell you in those 11 minutes? He told me to listen carefully and not to ask questions until he was done. He spoke very calmly. He always spoke calmly. But this was different. This was the calm of a person who had rehearsed something for 2 decades. He told me that there was a coup in progress. He told me that the terrace station director, the head of station security, 4 senior Olun financial officers, and a number of other officials whose names he listed were the leadership of a conspiracy that had been forming for 22 years. He told me the conspiracy had a name, which I will not repeat here because it is still classified. He told me the goal was to seize the trade authority and use it as leverage against the council. He told me the conspirators were, at that moment, in the upper chamber executing the delegates who would not cooperate. He told me he was sorry. He said he had hoped to give the information to the council before this day. He said he had tried 3 times to alert the appropriate authorities. He said his messages had been intercepted twice by the station director and once by a Threxan security officer whose name was in his notebook. He said he had decided after the 3rd attempt that the only way to make the information survive was to make sure it could not be erased. He said this was why he used paper. He said a datapad can be wiped, a network entry can be deleted, a spoken word can be denied. But a notebook that has been written in by hand every day for 22 years with consistent ink and consistent handwriting and consistent dating is a document that cannot be faked and cannot be quietly removed. He said the council would have to acknowledge it. He said the conspirators would not be able to claim it was fabricated. He said, "The pen makes you mean what you say." He pushed the notebook across the desk to me. He said, "Miss Solveig, I need you to take this and walk out of the archive and go to the emergency comm relay on sublevel 6. I need you to transmit the entire contents of this notebook, page by page, to the council civil registry, not to station security, not to the trade authority, to the registry. Do you understand?" I said yes. He said, "You will need to be quick. I do not think they know about the relay on sublevel 6, but they may. If they find you, do not let them have the notebook. Burn it if you have to. The registry has a partial copy already, but it is not complete. The last 6 months are only in this book." I said, "What about you?" He said, "I'm going to stay. They will come for the archive. If the archive is empty and the clerk is gone, they will know something is wrong. If I'm here drinking my tea, they will assume the archive is undisturbed. I can give you perhaps 20 minutes. I said they will kill you." He said, "Yes, probably." He said it the way one might mention a weather forecast. He said, "I have been writing my own obituary for some time, Miss Solveig. It is in the back of the notebook, if you would. After the registry has the rest. If you would read it at my funeral, I do not have anyone else to ask." I took the notebook, I left. What was in the notebook? Everything. I want you to understand what I mean by everything. I have read many records in my life. I have read court transcripts and intelligence dossiers and the personal diaries of statesmen. I have never read anything like this notebook. He had documented 22 years of station life. Not selectively, comprehensively. Every meeting he attended, every conversation he overheard in the corridors, every name of every visitor, every shift change in security, every unusual financial transfer he processed in the archive, every comment that struck him as off, every glance he noticed, every alliance he saw form and dissolve. He had cross-referenced everything. He had built over 22 years, a complete shadow record of Veral 9 alongside the official one. And on a separate set of pages, he had built a second record, the conspiracy. He had identified the first conspirator in his 4th year on the station. He had not been certain at the time. He had written in the margin, "This man is lying about his travel logs, and I do not know why." He had returned to that entry years later with a new note. He has lied 3 more times. The pattern is forming. He had identified the second conspirator in his 6th. The third in his eighth. By the 15th year, he had a list of 19 names. By the 20th year, the list was at 38. By the day of the coup, the list was at 46, and every name had a dossier, and every dossier had dates, and every date had a source, and every source could be verified against the station's official records. It was the most thorough piece of investigative work I have ever read. It was done in pen by one man in a basement in a brown jacket with a kettle that was technically against regulations. And on the last page, in the same careful handwriting, was his obituary. Would you read it? Yes, I have it here. I have permission from the registry. Walter Hennig, born in Bremen on Earth, died on Verel 9 station in the line of his work. 61 years of age. He kept a notebook. He drank tea. He gave 15 data pads to a school. He was a records clerk, which is a small thing in the eyes of most people, but he understood what most people do not, which is that a small thing done carefully and consistently for a long enough time is the same as a large thing. He had no family living. He requested no flowers. He asked only that the notebook be read. That is the obituary. That is what he wrote for himself. Part 6, Miran, I want to tell you something, and I want to tell the audience something. And I have not told this to anyone in the 410 years I've worked at the registry. My people, the Versani, lost our written archives in a war. This is a matter of public record, so I'm not breaking any confidence. It was during the Third Versani Civil War, 612 years ago. The losing faction, in their final week, set fire to the central archive on our homeworld. They burned 19,000 years of paper. They burned the obituaries of every Versani who had ever lived. They burned the marriage records, and the birth records, and the poems, and the legal codes, and the histories. They burned everything that proved my people had existed before that week. We rebuilt. Of course we rebuilt, but we are still finding the gaps. We are still finding family lines that simply end. Because there's no one alive who remembers the names, and the records that would have remembered them are ash. When I joined the registry 410 years ago, I joined because I did not want any other species to feel what my species feels. I did not want any culture to lose the proof of its own existence. I have spent 4 centuries archiving the dead of 200 species, and I have done it because I understand, in a way that I think most council species do not, what it means to keep a record. When I read Walter Hennig's notebook, I understood something I had not understood before. I understood that he was Versani, not biologically, of course. He was human. But in his soul, in the part of a person that decides what work is worth doing, he was one of mine. He understood what a record was. He understood that the act of writing something down by hand with patience is not a small act. It is a refusal. It is a refusal to let the truth be erased. It is a refusal to let the dead be forgotten. It is a refusal to let the powerful decide what was real. He was a records clerk in a basement, and he did with a pen and a notebook and 22 years of patience what an entire intelligence service could not do. I'm sorry, I told you I would not do this. Please take your time. I have read his notebook 3 times now. Each time I read it, I find something new. The last time, I noticed that he had recorded the birthdays of every member of the cleaning staff, not the senior staff, the cleaning staff. He noted in tiny handwriting that he had brought small cakes for each of them on their birthdays for 22 years. He did not write this as a record of his own kindness. He wrote it as a way of remembering them because no one else on the station would have. There were 43 names on that list, 43 people in the cleaning staff that he made sure existed in writing somewhere. I think about those 43 names a great deal. Miran, do you think he knew when he started the notebook that it would end this way? No, I do not think he did. I think he started the notebook because he was a person who wrote things down. I think the conspiracy happened to be there in the same building, and his habit of careful attention caught it. I think if there had been no conspiracy, the notebook would still exist, and it would still contain 22 years of birthdays and overheard conversations and small observations, and it would still be valuable, and we would never have known about it. I think that is the part that has stayed with me. The notebook would have been worth keeping even if nothing had happened. The fact that something happened is almost a coincidence. That is, I think, the most human thing about the entire story. Part 7. Yetha, may I ask you something? Off the record. Of course, though, I will leave it in. If you do not mind, I do not mind. When you read his obituary, the one he wrote for himself, what did you do? I read it 3 times, then I closed the note. Then I sat at my desk for some time. Then I made tea. I do not drink tea, Miran. My people do not drink tea, but I made it anyway. I think I wanted to understand what he tasted every morning for 22 years in his small office while he wrote. It was not very good. I did not make it correctly, I'm sure, but I drank it. And then I filed his obituary and I gave it the highest preservation status the registry can grant, and I made sure that the council was informed that the obituary had been written by the subject himself and that it would be read at his funeral, and that any attempt to alter it would be a violation of registry protocol punishable by exile. I did this because he asked, I want to close this interview with one observation, and then I will let the audience go. When the council investigators reconstructed the events of the coup, they found that the Tereth conspirators reached the lower archive at the predicted time. Walter Hennig was at his desk, drinking his tea, when they came in. He greeted them by name. He greeted all of them by name, in fact, even the ones who he had never met in person, because he had been studying their files for 15 years and he knew their faces. He told them calmly that they were too late. He told them the registry already had the notebook. He told them which sublevel the relay was on. He told them that a Kreshka attaché was at that moment transmitting the full record, and that no matter what they did to him in the next 10 minutes, the conspiracy was finished. He was, I am told, smiling when he said this. Not cruelly, not in triumph. He was smiling, the investigators concluded, because he was relieved. He had been carrying a secret for 22 years, and he was finally permitted to set it down. They killed him quickly, which is more mercy than they showed anyone else that day. I think they were afraid of him. I think they could not understand him. I think when they walked into the archive and found a small man in a brown jacket drinking tea, who had defeated them before they entered the room, they did not know what to do with that, and they did the only thing they knew how to do. Walter Hennig's notebook is in the council evidence vault. His obituary, the one he wrote for himself, is in the registry. The 43 cleaning staff he recorded are all still alive, and 3 of them have asked, since the inquest, to have copies of the page where their birthdays are written. We have granted these requests. We will grant any request like it, in perpetuity. There's one more thing. On the desk in the 3rd sub-level archive, the investigators found Walter's pen. It was lying on top of a fresh page in a new notebook he had just begun. He had written on the first line the date of that morning and the words, "Today is the day." Below that, he had written, "Breakfast was tea and toast. The toast was slightly burned, which is my fault." That was the last thing he wrote. A note about toast. I think about this often. I think the council species, when they read about Walter Hennig, want him to have been a hero. They want a last line that was brave or wise or final. They want him to have known he was about to die and to have said something meaningful about it. But the notebook does not work that way. The notebook is honest. The notebook records what happened in the order that it happened, and on the morning of the day Walter Hennig died, the thing that happened was that his toast was slightly burned, and he wanted to remember that it was his fault. This is the only honest thing in the room. This is what I keep coming back to. In a station full of conspirators and politicians and species who had spent 40,000 years learning how to lie elegantly, there was one small man in a basement with a pen writing down what was true. The conspirators thought they were going to seize the trade authority. They thought they were going to rewrite the history of the Corward sector. They thought they were going to be remembered. They were remembered. Walter Hennig made sure of that. He wrote their names and their dates and their crimes in ink by hand for 22 years in a brown cloth notebook that was the subject of polite laughter on every floor of Viral 9. They mocked his notebook for 22 years. They did not realize he was writing their obituary. Thank you, Miran, for sitting with me today. Thank you, Yetha, for asking. This has been Yetha Moore for the Galactic Civil Registry Oral History Program. The case file we have opened today will remain open in the public archive for as long as the registry exists, which we intend to be a very long time. If you wish to read Walter Hennig's obituary, it is available without restriction at any registry terminal. If you wish to read his notebook, you will need to request permission, and you will need to read it in person with a council guard. For 1 hour in silence, I recommend it. Bring tea.